everyone, and welcome once again to The View from the Midwest. It's time for another post-match edition for St. Louis FC. 2 weeks in a row now I've done this, and 2 weeks in a row St. Louis FC has not really shown up. Not really sure what's going on with the team right now. I know that they're battling a lot of injuries. They're still trying to feel their way out right now, but this is 2 weeks in a row where it's been a complete departure from what they saw or what they did earlier in the season. Earlier in the season, they weren't necessarily getting the results that we would have wanted or even they would have wanted, but there was still that St. Louis mentality of we're gonna continue all the way to the end. We're gonna fight for every ball. We're gonna hustle after everything. We're gonna put in the effort. The last couple games, for whatever reason, it just has not been there. Now, you could give a lot of credit to the opponents. St. Louis FC has played a couple tough opponents in the last couple weeks. You do have to give a lot of credit to the New York RedBulls too, as they played on Saturday. They really were probably technically the better team. In terms of fitness, they were probably the better team as well. And listen, I'm not taking anything away from New York Red Bulls, and I'm not trying to give too many excuses to St. Louis FC. They've played poorly the last couple games, but they did go through a long period there when they were playing in the U.S. Open Cup and playing very well and putting a lot of effort into that. Perhaps that's coming back to bite them now because they're not quite as deep as we would have hoped. We've seen a few bench players come in, and especially in the last game, I believe that was what was going on, is Coach Schilly was trying to rest a few people, get some experience for the reserve players, and try to cycle the team around. But for whatever reason, there were several players that came that were bench players that started that last game. We didn't see them at all tonight. And for whatever reason, their fitness level just wasn't up there. They were huffing and puffing after about 20 or 30 minutes. And granted, it was humid and all that kind of stuff. But these are professional athletes. Regardless of how much or how little they might be getting paid, they're pro athletes. You would expect a little more. Getting down to the crux of the matter, there are a couple things that have really kind of disappointed me the last couple games as regarding to St. Louis FC's performance. The first one has got to be urgency. That was the big problem against New York Red Bulls. You can say that New York was the better technical team and better fitness levels and all that, which I've already done. But when St. Louis FC was getting beat to every single ball, and either there was a lack of communication or there was a lack of, as I say, urgency on the ball, they were constantly getting run down from behind. It happened to Gasecki at least twice, to where you would expect at least 2 or 3 teammates to be saying that somebody was on his back, and instead he was sitting there standing on the ball looking for somebody to get open, somebody to make a run, something to do with the ball, and then he had it pilfered away. The same could be said of other players that were up top. They were constantly getting the ball and just allowing 2 defenders to come at them, and then all of a sudden you don't have anything to do with it. And it started even last week. For whatever reason, St. Louis is just determined to build everything out of the back. Now, we don't necessarily have the kind of players that you can just send long ball after long ball. They need to have possession. But to constantly be playing it back to the back 2 or the goalkeeper is just not getting the job done. They don't have the kind of ball movement necessary to pinpoint those passes through the midfield and all of a sudden connect to something up top. There's got to be quicker decisions. There has to be more urgency with this team if they're going to get back to the positive side of the ledger. The second thing that's wrong with this team right now, and I will give all credit to Coach Schilly. He's a good coach. He knows what he's doing. He's doing the best with what he has. But St. Louis really kind of needs to settle on some sort of formation. For the longest time during the beginning of the season, they were playing basically a 4-4-2 with the diamond formation. I mean, you can pass out the numbers however you want, but that's basically what they were going with. Now all of a sudden they've changed it up. They played a 3-5-2 today, or I mean, depending on how you want to divvy up the numbers again, it could have been it was a 4-5-1 today. But then you could say that it was a 4-2-3-1. Regardless of how you want to do it, they've changed things up. They've tried to get things going. It's just not really working. You've got to be able to settle on a certain formation and then pick your lineup off of that. If you're going to have somebody who maybe should be a starter, but you don't necessarily have a spot for them because they play the same position as somebody else who fits better into that system, then that's what you have to do. And maybe all of a sudden you have a super sub being able to come off the bench. It's just something that they have to get some sort of cohesion going, because right now, individually, every single player on St. Louis FC, maybe with one or two exceptions, but basically every player on the team, you can see where their talent lies. You can see why they are professional athletes, even if it's not at the highest stage. But they're not playing as though they've practiced and played together for a consistent basis. And again, this is still a first-year team. You're not going to get that cohesion as though they've played for years together, just boom like that. But when you're changing the system consistently and players are playing out of position left and right, you can't get that sort of fluidity to where players know where their teammate is going to be on the field without even having to look, because that's what's happening right now a lot. Is St. Louis FC is going for these no-look passes, trying to dink it around the field or send a long ball to where somebody should be, but they're not because the other player was thinking something else. Now, before we get too negative, again, you can't use this as an excuse for much longer because we're at the halfway point of the season. But as I said, this is still a first-year team. Things aren't just going to happen magically. You're going to have a few speed bumps in the road. And also, but they need to start turning things around. They need to start getting a few more wins, at least back to the draws. The 2 losses that they've had in the last couple weeks, and the record that they have at home now is just really not going to cut it. They've got 1 win at home, 3 draws, and I believe 4 losses now. That's just not going to do it. And when you've got big crowds that come out, you don't necessarily want to be playing your worst soccer when those crowds show up, because regardless of what the Luligans feel about the sport and how they're passionate they are and how passionate season ticket holders are, you do need those people that are buying the single game tickets to come back. And if the team isn't performing, those are the kind of people that you lose as fans. Regardless of all that, one of the other things that this team just needs is to get healthy. One of the big reasons that they have played poorly over the past few weeks, in my opinion, is James Musa. When he went down, you could just see the way that the team played was completely different. They don't have that linchpin, whether it's at the back or in the defensive midfield, wherever they want to play him. He's such a playmaker, such a commander of the ball, that when he went down, they have just lost that kind of that person that just kind of brings everybody together, that magnet. And they've had a few other injuries to key guys. They're a little bit thin on the defensive line now, especially with Dixon out. They have less depth. It's forcing players to play out of position, because right now Lynch is our only true forward. Gall should be playing up top, even though he's been fairly inconsistent regardless of where he has played. Hardware was played at a forward position today, the lone forward, but to me that's like playing Raheem Sterling as a lone forward. You're not going to get the kind of stuff that you want out of him there. He's more of an attacking midfielder. Players are playing in defensive spots when they should be out on the wings. They're playing out on wings when they should be up forward. It's just a mixed bag of the situation right now, and I feel for Coach Schilly because he's doing the best that he can. But because of injuries, you've had to kind of cycle guys around, play them at different spots, and right now it just isn't working. So St. Louis needs to get healthy, they need to show more urgency, and they need to settle on a certain system and just kind of go with that going forward. And hopefully things will start to turn around. That is The View from the Midwest. What are your views on today's topic? Comment, rate, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook, share it around and give us a thumbs up there as well. But until the next time, I'll see you then.